Once again, this would be part 2 of our webinar series. This webinar, we are talking about patient negotiations, staff training, and preparation. Again, my name is John Vigiano, Director of Marketing and Communications here at Simons. If you have any questions, you can please feel free to send them to John at Simons Agency, or just hold on and you can ask them at the end as well. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tim Buckles, who is our VP of Operations here. Tim will be doing the presentation today. If you were with us last week, you have an idea of his background. And again, just to recap, his experiences with revenue cycle management, industry best practices, and strategizing and planning. Tim has been here for 10 years and has a lot of experience across all types of size businesses, from past experience right up through his experience with Simons. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Tim.
All right, thank you, John. So today we're going to be talking about staff training and preparation. We're really going to have a goal today of going through the different building blocks, building relationships, listening skills, negotiating skills, all the way into role play. And the goal at the end of this is really to go through the different tenets of these things, do a deep dive into each one. And at the end of the presentation, you should be able to take this away to use to develop your own in-house training program for basically building the relationships, the listening skills, and negotiating skills. Here's our first step that we're going to take a look at is building relations. And what we've done is we've really broken it into 3 sections: the introduction, the conversation, and the close of the call. And to really kind of start off, one of the things that we always recommend when we're doing our training is being prepared. One of the tenets is basically whoever's the most prepared walking into a meeting is typically going to win. Whoever's the most prepared going into a negotiation is typically going to win. The other part is you're trying to build a relationship with the person here. So when you see that the person's name is Joe Smith, you don't want to be using Mr. Smith. What you want to do is be able to use the word Joe. So when the person picks up on the other line, it's like, hey, Joe, and you want that person to be able to answer, but you're actually building the relationship immediately right there on the phone. A lot of the key words of using we versus you, it's all about taking down barriers. The first time you start using you, or the more times you use the word you versus we, you're building barriers between you and the person on the other end of the phone. And the more that you can bring it together, the better the relationship you're going to have. So from here, you're transitioning into the conversation. One of the things that we always tell people is that you want to identify with their situation. You want to be able to empathize with what it is that they're going through, about why they're at the situation is where they are right now. You want to confirm that you understand what they're saying. Sometimes it's as easy as just repeating back what they're telling you, just so you're affirming that you are listening and you are hearing everything that they're saying to you. And then if you can, find a reason to compliment something that's going on in the call to help build that relationship. It could be something that they've said, it could be something that they're doing, it could be something that they're doing to get their life back together. Any of those types of things helps build those relationships. On the closing, you want to make sure that you're building them up, that if you're having a good transitional conversation with them, what you want to really be able to do is really kind of compliment and say, you know what, you're making a lot of really smart decisions here. You're doing a lot of things that are really right, and you're on the right track. It's really about pumping them up and really building up that relationship between you and the person on the phone. And the more times that you use their name throughout the conversation, it'll show you that you're going to have a stronger relationship and a stronger build in terms of developing whatever deal you're trying to do. One of the things that we've shown statistically within our own organization is that when you are using the first name on the phone call, you have a 40% higher conversion rate than for the people that aren't doing that. And we've done this with measurements within our organizations against other collectors that are using first names versus being more formal. We find that it's just a higher hit rate of the conversion. And the second part is just being the most prepared. And being the most prepared could be anything from researching the account before you call it, or it could just having the most prepared script going into the conversation. So any of those tenets are going to help you out an awful lot in terms of where those conversations go. Again, whoever's the most prepared usually wins, and that goes whether you're doing sales, negotiations, or going into meetings. And so it's a practice technique that's worked over and over again. So the second step in our process is really the listening. And so now that we've worked on building the relationship, and we're still going to take a look at the same 3 steps of the intro, the conversation, and the close, you're working on building the relationship on the intro part of the call. Well, one of the most important things that you can be doing is listening. And it's about listening to the patient on the phone versus trying to plan your reply. And some of the biggest struggles that we've had with collectors or people that we've trained is that they've connected on the call, they've built a relationship, and as the person's talking, trying to explain their situation, we're not listening on the other end of the call. And the problem is that we're trying to figure out the next thing that we're going to say, and getting so caught up in the next things that we need to get across, that we're not listening to what the person's presenting to us. And part of that is trying to vet out on the conversation piece what's emotion and what's logic, okay? So what are they using for excuses that are emotional versus what are the real reasons about why they can't pay? And so you have to spend a little bit of time diving into that and figuring out, are they coming at you with emotional responses that just don't make any sense? Or are they responses that are very, very logical, and you got to figure out how to work with them on that. The reason that they're in this place where they are right now is they don't want to be there. They want to be able to get the situation resolved, which is why they're on the phone with you. So the more that you can work back and forth with them, the better off you're going to be. In the closing part of it, it's responding, confirming, and following up. So, part of it's recapping what you guys have been talking about. Some of it is repeating back what they're telling you. Some of that is confirming that you understand their situation. And if you're not landing on the deal, you want to leave it open-ended enough to be able to follow back up with them at a later point in time. You want to finalize that partnership at this point. Silence and listening, okay? Probably the two most effective tools that you're going to have in your toolbox. There's a lot of times that you're talking with a person that you've built a relationship with, you're using your listening skills, they're presenting to you an option. Don't fire back right away. Put them on hold, pause it, and just give it 5 or 10 seconds. Get back on the line with them. It makes them think about whether or not what they presented to you is actually going to be something that's realistic. And then how you go back and present it back to them may carry a little bit more weight. Sometimes it's as much as presenting an offer and then just don't say anything. Just sit there. People don't like uncomfortable silence. They will struggle over and over again to keep the conversation going. And so a lot of times they'll end up telling you things that are going to help you in your conversation, or they're going to feel like they need to kind of come back with a counteroffer to the negotiations to come up with something a little bit better because you're not happy with it. That's what the silence implies. And listening what they come back with is very effective. And so you have to listen at this point, because if you're going to practice the timing of when you use the silence technique, you really have to know when to listen, and you have to know what they're saying, and then how you're going to script what you're going to come back with. So some of the most important tenets in this stage of the negotiations is extremely important. So the negotiating skills. This is where we have a lot of fun with our collections team in terms of working back and forth. So we're building the relationship, we're using our listening skills, we're using tools and techniques in terms of the silence, and then what kind of comes after the silence in terms of what we're hearing back and forth. Now what we want to do is take it to the next level. So when you're on the phone with the person, one of the things that we practice here is you put a mirror in front of the person that is talking on the phone. And if they're not smiling into the mirror, then they're not smiling across the phone. And it gets picked up on in terms of the tone and the tonality that's coming across on the phone. People that are not confident on the phone are going to be picked up on. And the debtors are going to jump on that. And they're going to know that you don't know what you're doing or you're not confident in what you're doing. And so it's going to lose your levels of credibility. Using the first name. Using well-practiced scripts that are going back and forth. That if you sound confident and you know what you're saying and you're not getting thrown on every objection that they're doing, you're going to have a much better chance of collecting the money. You have to have multiple styles. This is where not one approach fits all. You have to have multiple things that you can go into because everyone's not created equal, and your styles of how you present what's going back and forth and how you talk back and forth to people has to be able to be altered in a way that's going to be effective for that person. And you're going to have to figure that out a little bit on the fly based on the listening pieces that you see earlier and where the direction of the phone call is going. You have to know how to use different tones. When do you need to sound matter of fact? When do you need to empathize with them? When do you need to elevate up to where they're kind of talking, or when do you need to tone it back down? You want to use the different tones and you want to use the different styles to really control the conversation. It's a big key about, are you controlling the conversation, or is the person on the other end of the phone controlling the conversation? And then you want to ask a lot of open-ended questions. This is one of the things in negotiation, you don't want to be the one talking the most. Whoever talks the most at this stage of the game loses. And so using open-ended questions, you don't want them to be able to finish it off with a yes or a no. You want them to have to go into an explanation, and then you have to listen to what that explanation is and figure out if there's things in there that's going to work towards what you're trying to do, or if the things that they're presenting you with is emotion, and you have to figure out how to move away from that to more the fact-based decisions about what's really stopping them from being able to make a payment. So go over to the conversion piece of this. It goes back to what we were talking about, putting the person on hold, using a 10-second pause. So sometimes it's, hold on, let me go check, they presented you an offer, hold on, put them on hold and say, I need to go check with my supervisor. Put them on hold, you wait the 5 or 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds depending on the offer. You go back on, Joe, I heard your offer, I went back and presented it, here's what we can do. And now this is your time for your counter. You come back with the counter offer. And you want to be able to use, you never want to take the first offer that they give you because they can usually go higher than whatever the first offer is. So always counter, counter, counter. The other piece of it is use your sense of urgency. There's a lot of different things you can use. Take a look at urgency of end of the week, paydays, end of the month goals. There's lots of things that you can imply in there that need to happen. Otherwise, it may get escalated up to the next stage. You don't have to say what the next stage is or what even the escalation is. It's an implied sense of urgency is they should be wanting to deal with you before you have to escalate it up because they're just not going to be happy with who the next stage is going to be. Take a look at the objections that they're presenting. You want to drill down to them. If they're emotional, you need to get past those and you need to get down to whatever the fact-based decisions are that's really holding them back. Be a problem solver. Don't sit there and listen to everything they say and just say that's just not going to work. Try and work with them back and forth. Try and present alternate solutions. Try and present mini payment plans that may work initially for the next 30, 60, 90 days, and then say, you know what, I get where you are right now. Let's go back and revisit this. We can set this up right now, and then we'll go back and revisit it in 3 months. And when you're at a different spot in your life, let's see if we can renegotiate to speed this piece up. It's going to take effort. This is not a speed contest. You want to make sure that timing's everything here, that if you are talking to the person and you're listening to them and you think that you've got a payer on the line, you want to work through this and you want to spend a little bit extra time here. In this business, it's all about laws of probability. You've got so many hours in the day to be talking to people, and you want to make sure that your time is spent with the payers versus the people that don't want to pay you. And if you can convert a non-payer to a payer, that's fantastic. If you got someone that wants to pay, you should be spending the extra time with them. That's where your time is best spent. Switch on over to the close. Here we've got the counter offer. So a person comes and offers you $50. That's not where you want to land. You should be able to go back and push them back and say, you know what, $50, unfortunately that puts the payment plan into too long of a window for us, so we've got to tighten it up. Here's what I can do. Put them on hold, wait about 10 seconds, go back and say, okay, here's what we can do. I can't do the 50, but here's what we can do. We can do $88.43 for the first 3 payments, and then we can go down to your $50. Or here's what we can do for the first 3 months. Or if you have to land on that number, say, you know what, the best I can do is make that a temporary thing that we set up for the next couple months, and then we got to go back and revisit it. Does that work for you? You got to know when to hold and when to fold them. And what I mean by that is you got to identify, is the person just keeping you on the line, or are they really interested in making a payment? If they're really interested in making a payment and working with you, then the time that you're spending with them is really best spent. If you're sitting on the phone with the person and all they're doing is arguing with you and you're not getting anywhere, then your best bet is to actually set up a time that you got to go ahead and call them back again when they're more ready to talk and converse with you, than to sit in a situation that all you got to do is tie up your time, tie up your collector's time, and no one wins out of that because now you spent 15 minutes on the phone with somebody that didn't want to pay you in the first place, and now you've lost 15 minutes to talk to 2 or 3 people that probably did want to spend money with you to go ahead and get their debts cleared up with you. So, tenets of a firm commitment, we always say that before you get off the phone, make sure that you know what the amount is that you've agreed upon, make sure that you have an agreed upon date of payment, make sure you have an agreed upon method of payment about how that's going to happen. The more real that they can make that in their mind, the more likely it is that they're going to actually go ahead and pay you. And so if you get off the phone and you don't have those tenets really agreed upon and worked out, then in their mind, they've gotten you off the phone. They've done exactly what they wanted you to do. And you might have gotten off it saying, you know what, good conversation, I think, you know, that worked out really well. And what you've done is you've wasted 15 minutes on something that's not going to be real now. Because now you got to go back and have that conversation all over again later on. So, some of the effectiveness of the negotiating techniques, you know, listening through grievances before speaking. So, really understanding, is it emotion or is it fact-based? And the more that you can help work through a solution during the negotiation process, we found that, you know, about a third of our people have had a much higher rate of recovery off of those people that they're talking to. And the building of the rapport during the negotiation process, again, that is given, you know, 7 out of 10 times you've gotten a much more positive result out of it. Typically it results in payments, but at least it results in future conversations that we will go ahead and get the payments off of it within 30, 60, or 90 days. So keys here, patience and timing. You know, we tell our collectors here that, you know, you've got 8 hours in a day to have the most productive conversations that you possibly can. So here's where you got to go ahead and work smart and not hard, okay? That there's a lot of people that are working hard that go and touch, you know, 80, 100, 120 accounts, and out of 120 accounts they may get 3 arrangements out of the entire batch. And I've got people that may hit 40 or 60 accounts, but you know what, they get about 20 or 25 arrangements out of that group. Well, those are the people that I applaud because they're working smarter versus harder. It's not about touching the most amount of the accounts out there. It's about touching the right accounts and making sure that you're getting the payments coming in and making sure that you're identifying the payers and how you're spending your time. So time management, patience on the phone, listening, identifying the payers, these are some of the biggest key things that are going to help you out. So, you know, where you have your biggest asset, which is time for the entire course of the day, how you manage that time throughout the course of the day is just as important as the time spent on the phone with those people. So role playing. So one of the things that we like to do is we break into different rooms and we have different scripts. We identify some of the biggest objections and we start working in scripts that are going to become very, very natural for the people that are here at our organization. And most of the role playing really has to be designed around the 3 tenets: building the relationship, listening skills, going into negotiating skills, and having different scripts that will actually help them practice each one of those stages. One of the things that you want is you want them to have a very natural script that they can go into so it doesn't sound scripted. You want them to sound confident, you want them to sound secure, you want them to be practiced because you want them to be the most prepared in that conversation. The person that they're getting on the phone has probably been talking to multiple people, they probably owe multiple people money, and they're very, very versed on how to get people off the phone. The better off that you can prepare your people in terms of building a relationship, the listening skills, the negotiating skills, and having a well-rehearsed practice script in a role-play environment, and usually using probably the top 3 to 5 toughest scenarios that you run across will help you at the end of the day to become the best negotiators out there. So, in recap, one of the things I'd like to just kind of point out is that these have been very, very effective tools for us. And part of our 3-part series, where the first part we talked about planning and organizing and setting goals, today we spent a lot of time talking about staff training and preparation, and then our phase 3 one will be coming up next week. These all prepare our collectors to really hopefully be the best in the industry, and that's what our goal is that you want to make sure that you hire great people, and now you've got great people, you got to make sure you have a great training program. These tenets work day in and day out. They work in business, they work in all aspects of sales. If you find that you implement these programs, you're going to get a much, much higher success rate than what you may be currently experiencing right now. So we're not going to say that it works 100% of the time, but it's going to work more times than if you're not practicing them. So outside of that, I think that's the end of today's discussion off of that. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a little bit out of it. I certainly enjoyed it. If you have questions, please send them over to John, and we'll be more than happy to get back to you. If you have questions, feel free to call in over here to Simon's, and we'll be more than happy to set up time with you one-on-one on anything that you may want to dive a little bit more into. You know, we spend a lot of time training our people, we spend a lot of time picking our people, and we spend a lot of investment in tools and technology here. And so, you know, today's session was really about sharing some of that. So I hope you enjoyed, and I appreciate your time.